kept my composure. I told myself to breathe slowly, the way I always do when something inside me goes very still and very cold at the same time. The rehearsal dinner was the night before. I remember standing in the parking lot of Carver's Steakhouse on Route 9, watching the valet's handle cars I didn't recognize, and thinking how strange it was that my daughter was about to belong to a family I barely knew. Not strange in a bad way. Not yet. Just strange the way all big things feel strange when they're really happening. My daughter's name is Audrey. She is 34 years old, and she has her father's eyes and my stubbornness. And when she loves someone, she loves them completely, without hedging, without the kind of quiet self-protection that I spent most of my life trying to teach her. I used to think that was a flaw. Standing in that parking lot, watching her laugh at something her fiancé said, I thought it was the most beautiful thing about her. His name was Preston, 37. He worked in commercial real estate financing, or that was what he said. He wore good shoes and spoke in that easy, unhurried way that men learn when they've never had to rush for anything. He was handsome in a forgettable way. The kind of handsome that photographs well and then fades. I had met him 6 times before that weekend. 6 times. Over 18 months. I thought I knew enough. I did not know nearly enough. The wedding was on a Saturday in October, at a restored estate property outside Asheville, North Carolina. It was the kind of venue that costs more than my first house. Audrey had done well for herself. She built a medical billing software company from nothing, starting in the spare bedroom of her apartment in Charlotte. And by the time she sold it, she was 31 years old, and the number had 7 figures in it. She never talked about money. That was one of the things I admired most about her. She acted like it wasn't the most important thing in the room, even when it was. I arrived at the venue the morning of the wedding at 9:30. My role was simple: walk my daughter down the aisle. Her father passed 11 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, the fast kind. He was gone in 4 months. I had walked through that grief the way you walk through deep water. Slowly, with tremendous effort, 1 foot and then the other. By the time Audrey got engaged, I was fully on the other side of it, or as fully as you ever get. I was 63 years old, retired from 30 years of nursing administration, and I had made my peace with being alone. What I had not made peace with was anyone hurting my child. I got to the bridal suite first. Audrey wasn't dressed yet. Her 3 bridesmaids were there, her college roommate, her cousin from my side, and a friend from the early company days. They were drinking mimosas, and the room smelled like hairspray and something floral. I hugged each of them, and I set my bag down on the settee by the window, and I looked out at the mountains. The ceremony wasn't until 2 o'clock. I had time. I told the girls I was going to find the coordinator to check on the floral arrangement for my corsage, which was true enough. I had heard the previous evening that the wrong shade of ribbon had come in. Small things matter at weddings. The coordinator's station was down the main hallway, past the bar cart that was being stocked for the reception, past the double doors that led to the garden terrace. I knew the layout because I'd walked it during the site visit 3 months before. I was passing the door to the groom's suite when I heard the laughing. Not light laughing. The kind of laughing that comes out of people when they're relaxed and certain and privately pleased with themselves. The door was heavy but old, and it hadn't latched properly. There was a gap of maybe half an inch. I wasn't trying to hear anything. I want to be clear about that. I was walking past a door, but I heard his voice first. She doesn't have a prenup, Mom. I made sure of that. I stopped. I am 63 years old, and I have had my share of moments where something you hear doesn't immediately register as real. There's a half second where your brain tries to file it somewhere logical, tries to make it into something that makes sense. That half second happened. Then the sense of it arrived, all at once, like cold water. Smart boy. His mother's voice. I had met her twice. Her name was Lorraine, a tall woman, thin, with the particular kind of smile that is always performing something. Did she say anything about the trust? She mentioned it once. Her mother set it up after the company sold. Something in the neighborhood of 4 million, maybe more. She's not exact about numbers with me. A pause. Then his voice dropped into something softer and more satisfied. She trusts me. Lorraine laughed again. Of course she does. You've been very patient. 18 months is not nothing. No, it isn't. A sound like ice in a glass. Once you're married, what's hers is yours. North Carolina is equitable distribution. You know what that means. It means I don't have to do anything dramatic. I just have to be married long enough. 2 years, maybe 3. Long enough that it looks real. And then we figure it out. I'm not going to be reckless. The real estate thing is real, it's just— He paused. Slower than I'd like. I need the runway. You have always needed runway, Lorraine said, and there was affection in it, the complicated kind, the kind that has enabled a person for decades. I stood in that hallway for a moment. I was aware of my own breathing. I was aware of the sound of a vacuum cleaner somewhere far away, and the distant clinking from the bar cart, and a bird outside that did not know or care what I had just heard. Then I walked to the end of the hallway, turned the corner, found a chair beside a window overlooking the garden, and sat down. I am not a woman who panics. I spent 30 years in hospital administration. I have told families that their person was not coming home. I have managed crises at 2 a.m. with inadequate staff and inadequate resources and no one above me to call. I know what it is to hold yourself together when everything in you wants to come apart. So I sat in that chair and I did not panic. I thought, Audrey did not have a prenuptial agreement. I knew this. I had raised it gently 6 months before. I had framed it as something every person with significant assets should consider, regardless of who they were marrying. She had looked at me with something that was not quite hurt and not quite dismissal, and said, Mom, I'm not going to start a marriage by telling someone I don't trust them. I had let it go. I should not have let it go, but I had, and here we were, 40 minutes into the morning of her wedding day, and her fiancé was in a room 20 feet away explaining to his mother that he had planned all of this. 18 months of patience. That was what he had said. I pulled out my phone. I have a lawyer. Her name is Wanda Holt. She handled my husband's estate, and she has been my attorney for 19 years. She is 70 years old, and she does not suffer fools, and she answers her phone on weekends. I dialed her number. She picked up on the 3rd ring. I told her in a low voice exactly what I had heard, verbatim, as best I could. She was quiet through all of it. Are you sure about what you heard? She said. Wanda, I was a charge nurse for 12 years. I am sure. She was quiet for another moment. Okay, here's what I need you to understand. If they marry today and he later argues equitable distribution, the court looks at the length of the marriage, contributions of each spouse, economic circumstances. If she has a trust and it's properly structured, that's one thing. But if marital funds become commingled with trust assets over 2 or 3 years and he has a good attorney, she stopped. It gets complicated. I understand. What do you want to do? And that was the question, wasn't it? That was the question I sat with for the next 4 minutes, looking out at the mountains and the October sky, which was that particular shade of blue that you only get in the fall in the Carolinas. What did I want to do? I did not want to humiliate my daughter. I did not want to be wrong. I did not want to be the mother who ruins her child's wedding day over something she misheard or misunderstood. But I also knew what I had heard. I knew the voice. I knew the tone. I knew what "she trusts me" sounds like when it is said like a strategy rather than a blessing. I called my son-in-law, not Preston, my son-in-law from my older daughter. His name is Dale, and he is a retired detective from the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office. I told him what I had heard. He said two things. First, "That's enough for me." Second, "Do you want me there?" I said yes. Then I went back to the bridal suite. Audrey was in her dress by then. She looked extraordinary. She was standing at the full-length mirror while her roommate arranged the buttons at her back, and I stood in the doorway for a moment and just looked at her. 34 years old, her father's eyes, my stubbornness. She caught my reflection in the mirror and smiled. "Mom, don't you dare cry already." "I'm not crying," I said. She tilted her head. "She knows me. She has known me her entire life, and there is no version of my face she has not studied." "Mom, what's wrong?" The bridesmaids were right there. Audrey's roommate, her cousin, her friend. 3 people who loved her, who had gotten up early on a Saturday morning and driven in from 3 different cities. The room still smelled like hairspray and mimosas. Somewhere outside, caterers were setting up a reception for 112 people. The flowers were white and blush, Audrey's choice, and they were throughout the room. "Nothing is wrong," I said. "I just need 5 minutes with you alone." The bridesmaids left without being asked twice. They are good women and they read the room. When the door closed, I sat down on the settee. I asked Audrey to sit beside me. She gathered her dress carefully and sat, and she took my hand and I told her. I told her everything exactly as I had heard it. I did not soften it. I did not speculate. I told her only what I knew and what I had heard with my own ears. She was very still while I spoke. Audrey goes still when something matters. It has always been like that with her. When her father got sick, she went still. She didn't cry in front of me for 3 weeks. She held it inside her like something she was keeping safe. And then one evening she came to the house and we sat at the kitchen table until midnight, and she let it out. She goes still first. That is how I knew she was listening. That is how I knew she believed me. When I finished, she said nothing for a long moment. She was looking at our joined hands. "Did he say those exact words?" she said finally. "The prenup part." "She doesn't have a prenup, Mom." "I made sure of that." I recited it back to her exactly. "Yes, those exact words." Another silence. "And the trust." "Yes." She closed her eyes. I watched her face do something that I don't have a clean word for. It was the face of someone understanding a thing they do not want to understand. Grief and clarity arriving together, which is one of the more brutal combinations. "I need to make a phone call," she said. "Okay." She stood still holding my hand and then she released it. She walked to the window. I watched her dial a number and I heard her say very quietly, "I need you to check something for me. Right now. I need to know if there is anything in Preston's financial history that I should have found before today." A pause. "I know what day it is. I know. That's why I'm calling right now." She listened for a moment. "Thank you." She hung up. She turned around. "That was the woman who did my due diligence on business partners," Audrey said. "She owes me a favor." I had not known my daughter had a person like that. I felt something settle in my chest. A kind of pride that had nothing to do with the wedding dress or the October venue or any of it. She had built her business carefully. She had built her life carefully. She had just trusted the wrong person. That was not her fault. That is never the fault of the person who is trusting. We waited. Audrey sat back down beside me. She did not cry. We did not speak much. Outside, I could hear the sounds of the venue preparing. Voices, the distant sound of music being tested through speakers, the sound of a door somewhere. The wedding coordinator knocked at 11:15, and Audrey told her we needed another few minutes. The coordinator's voice was professionally neutral. She said, "Of course, The call came back at 11:40. I watched Audrey's face as she listened. She asked 2 questions. Then she said thank you, and she put the phone down on the cushion beside her. "He has a judgment against him," she said, "from a business partner, filed 14 months ago. He never told me." She paused. "There's also an ex-girlfriend in Denver who is currently in a civil dispute with him over money she lent him that he never repaid." Another pause. $68,000. The room was very quiet. "Mom," Audrey said, "you were right. I did not say I know. I did not say I told you so. There is no satisfaction in being right about something like this. There is only the grief of it. The 18 months she had invested, the dress, the flowers, the 112 people gathering outside, the life she had imagined with a man who had been calculating from the very beginning." I held her hand. That was all I could do. Dale arrived at 12:20. He came in quietly, through the side entrance, and he sat with us for a few minutes. "He is a steady man, Dale. Not dramatic," he said. "Audrey, whatever you decide, we handle it. Tell me what you want." Audrey was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I want it to be over. I want it to be done before I have to stand in that room." Dale nodded. "I can do that. What happened next I will describe simply because it does not need embellishment." Dale went to the groom's suite. I do not know exactly what he said. I know that he was a detective for 21 years, and he knows how to have a conversation that closes a door without drama. Preston and Lorraine left the venue before 1 o'clock. There was no scene. There was no shouting in the hallways. The coordinator was informed privately that the ceremony would not be taking place, and she handled the guests with the kind of professional calm that must be part of her training, because it was remarkable to watch. I stood with Audrey in the bridal suite while the sound of guests being redirected filtered in from outside. She had changed out of her dress by then. She was in the slacks and sweater she had worn to the venue that morning, and she looked young and tired and more like herself than she had looked all weekend. "I keep thinking about all the things I missed," she said. "You didn't miss them because you were foolish," I said. "You missed them because you were generous. That's different." She looked at me. "Your father was the same way," I said. "He gave people the full measure of his trust. It was one of the best things about him, and it cost him sometimes. It doesn't mean you stop doing it. It means you let the people who love you help you check." She was quiet. "I'm sorry I didn't push harder on the prenup," I said. "Mom, I should have pushed harder. Mom." She put her hand on my arm. "You saved me today. Don't apologize to me today. Don't apologize to me today." We sat there for a while longer. The October light was moving across the floor. Outside, I could hear the caterers beginning the quiet work of redirecting a reception that would not happen, and somewhere in it I could hear, very faintly, the sound of a few guests who had stayed. Audrey's college friends, her cousin Dale and his wife, gathering in the garden. Not out of obligation, just because they didn't want to leave her alone in a place that was supposed to be a celebration. That detail meant more to me than almost anything else from that day. In the weeks after, Audrey did exactly what she needed to do. She consulted with Wanda. She had her financial accounts reviewed. She documented everything she had found, including the judgment and the dispute in Denver, and she sent it, at Wanda's recommendation, to Preston's attorney with a very brief letter making clear that she had no interest in contact or litigation and expected the same in return. She did not hear from him again. The harder part was not the practical cleanup. The harder part was the ordinary grief of it, the loss of something she had believed in, the replaying of small moments that looked different in hindsight, the work of understanding that she had loved someone who was not who she thought he was, and that loving someone fully is never something to be ashamed of, even when it goes wrong. She called me every few days in November. We talked about nothing important, mostly. Her cat, a recipe she was trying, a book she had started, That is how we have always gotten through things, not by talking directly at them every moment, but by keeping the line open, by staying in each other's ordinary days. By December, she was doing better. By spring, she was herself again. I am 63 years old, and I have learned, across all of those years, that the moments that require the most courage are often the quietest ones. Not the confrontations, not the declarations. Those come afterward. The courage is in the hallway. It is in the choice you make when you hear something you cannot unhear, when the easy thing would be to keep walking and tell yourself you weren't sure, that it was none of your business, that she's a grown woman and it's her life. She is a grown woman. It is her life. And she is also my daughter. Those two things have always lived together, and they always will. I kept my composure that day because she needed me to. I stayed calm because someone had to hold the room still while everything shifted. But I want to be honest. There is a version of that day where I walk past that door and hear nothing, and she marries him. And 2.5 years later, she is sitting across a conference table from a family law attorney, trying to understand how the person she loved had been counting on her generosity from the very first evening they met. That version did not happen. I am grateful for every day that it didn't. I have thought about that hallway many times since October. Not with anger anymore. That part passed quickly. What stayed with me was something quieter and harder to name. A kind of reckoning. Preston did not become who he was overnight. That is the thing I keep coming back to. 18 months of patience, he had said, like it was an investment he was tending. And in a way, I suppose it was. He had made a series of choices, each one building on the last, each one requiring him to look at my daughter and decide again that she was a means to something rather than a person to be loved. That accumulation of choices, that is what I mean when I say actions have weight. Not in any mystical sense. Just the plain fact that what we do shapes what we become. And what we become determines what eventually catches up with us. Preston had spent years building a version of himself that could not hold. It was always going to come down, one way or another. I just happened to be in the hallway when it did. Audrey is the one I think about most. Not with worry. She is stronger than I sometimes remember. What I think about is the particular kind of courage it took for her to sit in that bridal suite, in that dress, and choose the truth over the day she had planned. That is not a small thing. Most of us, at some point, have been offered the choice between comfort and clarity, between believing what we want to believe and seeing what is actually there. Audrey chose clarity. In a room full of flowers and carefully arranged beauty, with 112 people waiting outside, she chose to see it plainly. I do not know many people who would have done that as steadily as she did. I have been thinking about what I would tell a younger version of myself, or any woman raising a daughter who is generous with her trust. I would say this: generosity is not the problem. Audrey's willingness to love fully, without hedging, was never the flaw. The flaw was the absence of anyone checking the door she couldn't see behind. That is what families are for, I think. Not to manage each other's choices, but to stand in the hallways, to pay attention, to say something when something needs to be said, even when the timing is terrible and the flowers are already arranged and the guests are already seated. Wisdom is not about being suspicious of people. It is about understanding that love and verification are not opposites. You can believe in someone and still ask questions. You can trust your instincts and still call your attorney on a Saturday morning. Audrey learned that. I reinforced it too late, and I will carry that. But she has it now, and she will pass it on someday in one form or another to someone who needs it. What I know is that the hardest thing I did that day was sit down in that chair after I heard what I heard and not walk away from it, not file it somewhere easier, not tell myself I wasn't sure. I was sure. And being sure and doing something about it, when doing something is costly, that is the whole of it, really. That is what integrity looks like on an ordinary Saturday in October, In a venue outside Asheville, when nobody is watching and the choice is entirely your own, I kept my composure. I made the calls. I held her hand. That was enough. It turned out to be exactly enough.